Hello, welcome to Hope Church Harrogate's Message of the Week. If you'd like to connect with us, please head over to hopeharrogate.co.uk/connect. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so our Bible reading for this morning is from Romans 8, verse 18 to 24, if you'd like to turn there with us. All right, reading from verse 18. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved.
Is there a video next? Woo! Is there a video next, Ezio?
People of Harrogate, what do you feel are the biggest challenges facing the world right now?
Oh, gosh. Climate change, I think.
Economic.
Oof. Climate.
Prices increase. Everything.
Yeah.
For everything.
Yeah.
Like families not being so successful and stuff,
Yeah.
and like not making enough money and stuff.
Yeah.
Hospital crisis.
Hospital crisis. Yeah.
War. The war.
But no, what are your personal worries? What are things?
Apart from this one.
Yeah, apart from this gorgeous little one. Yeah.
I guess like money worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, cost of living crisis and that.
Yeah.
I think I don't have something to worry about.
It's future years kids, isn't it? Really, what they got to look forward to. You know, we don't sort things out even in the world financially.
And what brings you joy?
My children, definitely.
Your
Yeah,
children.
and my husband, yeah. Having some free time for doing things to family, as
Yeah.
personally as well, like sports, all type of things.
Really, people around me, like friends and family. Yeah.
So my friends having a nice pint of Guinness.
Studying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Education. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, Liga.
Answers, aren't there, to those questions? Let me sort myself out here. Bruce, you're shorter than me, but you have it higher than me. Look at this. We are in the middle of a series, if you're new here, welcome, called What's Wrong with the World? And the video we've just watched is a snapshot of the responses of the people of Harrogate to that question, asked in different types of ways. And the most frequent answer that we received on the streets of Harrogate for what is wrong with the world was connected to the climate. Wonder if that surprises you, or if that's what you were expecting that people would say. And so, in honor of that, I've picked today's title, which is this: The Planet is on Fire, which is not working when I hit my phone, Cuzio. Let me try. I think I must be out of reach. You might have to do this for me, sorry. Do you want to go to the next slide? I'll give up. The planet is on fire. That's the response. And I've got a lovely picture of the planet on fire. It's neither of those two. I'm not the only one with problems. Anyway, I'll continue. I've picked such an evocative title for it because we're well used to hearing extreme things about this situation. You don't have to listen to very much news or read very much out there to have heard some very, very serious things about the situation we find ourselves in. David Attenborough, everyone's favorite knight of the realm, he says climate change is the biggest threat to security that modern humans have ever faced. Thanks, David. Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the UN, says if we continue on our current path, we will face the collapse of everything that gives us our security. Again, a pretty dire assessment of the situation. Greta Thunberg, she puts it most evocatively of all. She says, adults keep saying that we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is. Is that my impression? The planet is on fire, so the story goes. And 20 years ago, I sat at university. I know I look really young. And I studied climate change as part of my studies, and the science was incredibly clear to me. Perhaps the reason that we hear so much disagreement and so many contested voices is because the reality is our climate does not exist in a silo. It is deeply connected and interconnected and impossible to disconnect from politics, from the economy, from people's quality of life, from international development, from colonial history. And so where you find people speaking about climate change as if it is not a problem, more often than not, what they're saying is, there are some other things that are more important, and so I just don't care about this one. But the climate crisis, friends, is real. Its effects are significant, and they are devastating, especially if you already live in an area that is exposed to this risk. At Christmas, we took up an offering, a carol service. We took £17,000 to send to a project in Zambia that our friends are pioneering, which is building climate resilience into farming practices in Zambia. The reason that's so pressing is that for the last 3 years, the rains have not come, and so there is currently an emergency situation of famine throughout regions of that country. Our churches in Malawi and Zambia both have crisis situations announced by the government, and on a weekly basis are holding funerals for church members who are starving to death. Because the climate patterns of our planet have been altered by human activity, and the way that the rains used to come no longer happens. We don't feel the effects of the climate change so easily here, but the vulnerable, those most at risk, already do. Closer to home, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine called Dave came and spoke here. He was talking about football trophies, you might remember, and he leads their church in Shrewsbury, and their church building has flooded multiple times in recent years, despite not having a history of flooding. And the reason is that because the warmer atmosphere holds more water when it rains, it's more intense, and that causes flooding and the damage that comes with the flooding, which if Dave was here, he would tell you with tears in his eyes, because he has to sweep the silt off of his church floor every single time it washes through their building. The last 10 years have been the hottest 10 years on record since we started recording in 1880, when taken at a global level. We are insulated from the effects. We are insulated from recognizing it often, but friends, the planet isn't. Humanity isn't, and it will get worse. On the way in, we asked you to place a star on a graph, and I think, should technology have worked, we have a photo of the end result coming now. I asked you to plot, how do you feel about the seriousness of the climate crisis on one axis versus what is your level of hope for the planet on the other? And this is what everyone in the room has said. I've not yet seen it, so I'm just going to take a moment. There's a clear trend on that graph. And my aim today is essentially to tell you why all of our stars should be in the top right quadrant of that graph. Climate change is a serious threat, but as Christians, we have real hope. hope that demands action from us all. So I've got 3 visuals. That's my first. I've got 2 more coming, and I've got my favorite story that I've ever told to tell you later on as well. We are going to look at why it's gone wrong. Why is this wrong with the world? And how we can have hope. And we're in church today, you might have noticed. So I'm coming with a Christian perspective. I've started with the story outside. I've talked a little bit about science, but I'm about to talk a lot about God. And if that's a surprise to you, that's often what happens in church. And I can do the science conversations and the politics conversations, if you like, afterwards over a cup of coffee. My aim is to change the way you see everything today. Just a small aim. You've got to set big aims for yourself in life, haven't you? Our reading from Scripture talked for us about the connection between creation and humanity. Susie, can we have the one with the triangle on? Here's the deal. God created the world. You know that story. Even if you've never been in church before, you'll have heard it somewhere. God created the world, and from creation, he created humanity. And the destiny and the purpose of creation and humanity was interconnected from that point forward. Humanity was created with the dust of creation and animated with the breath of God. And God commissions humanity to be fruitful, to multiply in number, and to fill the earth. And as they do, to rule over it. Now, the word rule is quite an evocative word, and what is going on there is God is saying, I want you to partner with me in caring for and stewarding the planet. This is not a rule which exploits, as often we are familiar with. It's not a rule which abuses. It is a rule which cares for the creation. The picture is of gardeners, or as benevolent kings and queens. And we see the heart of God for the planet throughout the Old Testament. If you take the time to read through the law, I'm doing Bible in 1 year, as I've said a few times with Nikki Gumbel, not personally, as I've said a few times, but through my Bible app on my phone. And I've just got to Leviticus, and I know, because I've done some work on this before, that I'm about to come to multiple references of how God instructs his people to care for the world he has given them. For example, built into the law that he gives to Israel is that the land should be given rest every 7 years. It should be given a Sabbath. Every 7 lots of 7, it gets 2 years rest, the year of Jubilee. But the whole economic system that's built in, therefore, to land ownership protects it and ensures that it's given rest, that the people steward it carefully, nurturing life and not stripping everything that they possibly can out of it. But the story of humanity's existence on the face of the planet is that although that's what God creates us for, that's not what happens. Humanity does not follow the ways of God. Humanity rejects the ways of God. Humanity rejects God and goes their own way, and each of us has done this. It causes a cosmic level rupturing in the connection between humanity and God, and humanity and creation. And the theological word for this is pretty long. It's quite difficult to pronounce. It's sin. And I've got a diagram for it as well. Sin separates out God and humanity and creation. Why is the planet on fire? The answer is sin. Humanity is not doing what it has been commissioned to do. We have rejected God, we have rejected his ways, and we are damaging the planet as a result, just as we are damaging one another. Don't know if you've noticed. Human beings seem to excel at abusing and exploiting one another, just as we excel at abusing and exploiting the planet. Humanity is not okay on the other side of that red line, separated from God. The world is broken. The infection and the destruction of sin distorts and pollutes every single aspect of life. That's the Christian understanding of the world. You don't have to pay too much attention in life to realize that. Each of us could name many consequences of sin in our lives very quickly. And you don't have to pay too much attention to the story of our broken planet out there in our world before you're told that humanity is the problem. That humanity it's as if we're some kind of pestilence on the face of the earth, and if we could get rid of humanity, the planet would be fine. And if you've ever heard something like that out there. From a Christian perspective, it's simply not true. Humanity is not the problem. Sin is the problem. Sin is the pestilence that destroys creation, destroys humanity's relationship with one another, with God, and with the planet. Sin is the problem, and something needs to be done. If you grew up in a certain type of church, you will be familiar with this diagram. If you didn't grow up in that type of church, you might look at it and wonder what's going to happen next. See, this is a picture of the rupture that is caused by sin. Humanity leaves God, departs from him, departs from his ways, and is separated off. In an insurpassable chasm is opened up between the two. God, in his goodness and care, in his light, is on this side. Humanity, in our brokenness, our despair, in our darkness, is on this side. And sin separates us from him. It's an individual reality, and a corporate reality, and a cosmic reality. But the Christian story tells us that God so loves the world that he did something about it. He refused to leave this as the situation. God enters creation. He leaves his side and comes to humanity's side in Jesus Christ. God in the flesh, fully God yet fully human, and he bridges the divide. Jesus' life is not marked by rejecting God, as human life often is. Jesus' life is marked by following God's ways, of knowing God in every moment, rejecting sin in every moment, and as such, he builds the bridge between the two sides. In his death on the cross, the power of sin is punctured and broken. Sin has failed to lay a glove on Jesus, and death, the ultimate consequence of sin, fails to hold him, because as Steve so beautifully put it in worship, the buried body, wrapped in cloths, suddenly breathes. In rising from the dead, Jesus opens up a new way of life for us. A new life is possible, life with God, not separate from him. And for us to cross that divide, we're able to be reconciled with God and embraced by the God of love, by the God of peace, by the God of righteousness. We're able to exit darkness and walk into life and light in all its fullness. The thing is that what this classic church picture fails to show us is that it does not just restore the relationship between humanity and God. It also restores the relationship between humanity and creation. As we put our faith in Jesus, as we are born again, we don't remain separated out from creation. We are joined back into good relationship with it as well. And now, just as our actions and our attitudes towards God are transformed as we come to faith in Jesus, just as our attitudes and actions towards one another are transformed as we come to faith in Jesus, so our attitudes and actions in relation to creation are transformed as we come to life in Jesus. Friends, life with Jesus means walking into our call and our commission to be stewards of creation, to be gardeners of creation once more. Have the next slide, Susio. This began 2,000 years ago, the restoration of this picture. It continues today, and one day it will be fully complete. One day, Jesus returns. One day, the final nails are hammered into the coffin of sin, and its last traces of infection are snuffed out on the face of the earth. As we come to faith in Jesus, we walk into wholeness, but I don't know if you've noticed, our wholeness is not yet fully evident in our lives. But one day it will be. One day the wholeness for creation will be seen too, as it enters into the glorious freedom that we're promised. That's what our Bible reading was about earlier, as Liz read for us. Have the next slide, Susio, please. This passage in Romans 8, which you might be familiar with, talks about creation waiting in eager expectation for that day when the children of God are revealed. Creation was subjected to frustration. Its destiny was bound to humanity's, and it aches as it longs for humanity's ultimate destiny to be lifted out of sin and to be rescued, redeemed, and reconciled to God, to be revealed on the face of the earth. Jesus has made a way for humanity to be freed. Jesus has made a way for creation to be freed. When we see the difference between the situation now and the situation then, it causes deep groaning. That's what this passage says. We groan because we long for the full freedom and wholeness that God has promised to us, and we groan for the full freedom and promise that God has given to creation. But friends, the ultimate destiny is a promise of God. Creation will be freed from the consequences of sin. Just as we receive freedom and breakthrough, so too does creation. We can recognize that there is both serious threat and real hope in how we view the planet. But here's the thing. Just as we don't sit with real hope passively for restoration in our relationships, just as we don't sit passively and wait for restoration in our relationship with God, but we step in and there are actions that change in our lives as a result, attitudes of heart, which we lean into and see transformed, so too our actions and our attitudes towards creation must be transformed. It can seem insurmountably big when you look at the situation in our planet. It's the same which is true of war, isn't it, from last week as Rachel was talking. But throughout this entire series, what we're going to see is time and again that the impact of what God's people do, whether that's adjusting our relationship with creation or whether that's loving our enemies like last week, what God's people do is supernaturally disproportionate to the action itself because the power of God is with them. You might think that the small thing you do doesn't matter, but the story of the scriptures tells you that what you do is immeasurably more powerful than you can imagine because God is with you. What we do makes more difference than it should. What we do makes more difference than we think, and it brings me to my favorite story of all time. This is a story about a man called Thomas Baker. This is Thomas Baker. He's got a similar hairstyle to me. Just hasn't learned to shave the back. And Thomas Baker was a Methodist missionary in the 19th century. And he was based in the Pacific, and he's famous, most famous for being based in Fiji. I messaged Eric and Enna, and I said, I've got this story about a guy from Fiji. I want to ask you permission to share it for reasons you'll see in a moment. And they were like, Adam, this is like one of Fiji's most famous stories. We love this story. I was like, wow. I used to tell this story in secondary schools because it's a story about cannibals. And teenagers love nothing more than a story of like gore. See, Thomas Baker was a missionary to Fiji, along with many others. He's actually Fiji's only missionary martyr, so history books say. And he had seen fruit, and the people he was with had seen fruit. They'd seen many people give their lives to Jesus. And we've heard stories. Eric stood here at Nation Sunday and told us the supernatural stories of God at work in Fiji, of how things were transformed. And some of that was this time with Thomas Baker. And he went with a number of Fijians who had placed their faith in Jesus to the interior of the main island to reach a tribe. And he got to the tribe and they did not welcome him, they killed him. And they ate him. They ate everything but his boots. That's how the story goes. And in fact, you can go to a museum in Fiji and see the fragments of his boots. You can find his Bible and his boots. But if we cut to 2003, and I need you to picture the scene with your imagination for a moment. Picture this scene, 2003, a Fijian tribe dressed up in traditional garb, whale's teeth necklaces, full warrior gear, axes in hand, weeping, with some slightly awkward-looking white Australians sitting with them. Because that is the actual scene in 2003 when the tribe called for a reconciliation ceremony, and they invited Thomas Baker's great-great-grandchildren to join them. The Prime Minister of Fiji came, the tribe, now Christian tribe, the gospel bore fruit in their lives, and with tears of repentance, they asked the forgiveness of Thomas Baker's family. And they were reconciled. I've got a photo of Thomas Baker's great-great-grandson, Les Lester, embracing the tribal chief. It was a beautiful moment. It made global news. As you can see by the fact that one of the Getty image photographers was there. What didn't make global news is what happened afterwards. You see, the reason that tribe called the reconciliation ceremony is that the lakes and ponds in their territory had become poisoned. That the land that they lived in had become barren. And they felt that it was a consequence of their wrong relationship with the people that they'd wronged historically. And so they called for this reconciliation ceremony. There are multiple reports, documented and researched, of poisoned lakes now teeming with life in the subsequent years to this ceremony. There's verified evidence of many nature miracles in this space, including barren land now giving superabundant harvests. In the scriptures, you find this promise in 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. If we humble ourselves and cross the bridge of reconciliation that is available through the cross of Jesus Christ, if we will turn from our wicked ways, yes, in relation to the planet, but also in relation to God and to one another, and we follow God's good ways, it doesn't just lead to our forgiveness and a ticket to heaven. It supernaturally changes things in the here and now. I don't know what you think the significance of your life is all about, but if the power of God lives inside of you, then the impact of your actions will far outstrip what you think it should. There could be people in this room today who will play pivotal roles in seeing technological change that will enable us to alter the path and the trajectory of the climate crisis. There could be people sitting in this room today whose own story, whose own speaking about this, whose own lifestyle will fundamentally alter how whole communities will act and set a new trajectory for this issue. Friends, humanity is not the problem. Sin is the problem. And the call of Jesus is to follow his ways. As we humble ourselves, realize, turn from our sin and follow his ways, incredible things can happen. The climate crisis is super serious. It is one of the biggest things that is wrong with our world. But as people of faith, we can have hope because God knows. And God has done something about it, and he calls us to take up our position as those he always called to be those who ruled the world like benevolent kings and queens, to rule the world like a gardener that tends for the earth and nurtures it. The challenge is, will you? The challenge to the good news of Jesus is, will you hear what God has said about the separation between you and him, and will you respond? And if you're a Christian, you probably already have done this morning. You've crossed that bridge, and you found reconciliation from God. You've probably also found reconciliation with people and are doing so more and more. But did you know it means that we are reconciled with creation as well? Could be this morning that you're here, and this is your big answer. You've not got faith. Someone invited you because they knew this was the topic. And this is what Christianity has to say. The planet isn't going to burn and we're going to go off to heaven and it doesn't matter. That's what Christians have said historically. It simply isn't the story of the scriptures. The story of the scriptures is that God knows it's a problem and has done something. And he calls his people to do something about it. He calls all of humanity to cross the bridge, to join him in, yes, his love, yes, his forgiveness, yes, his light, but even more than that, to be those who tend the earth, who care for it and nurture it. Friends, the call of this message is not cerebral. I've given you lots of reasons why there is a problem in creation and why we can have hope. But it is not a hope that goes on your bookshelf. It's a hope that alters our lives. The changes in your life do far more than you could ever dream. The landing point of this message is, how will you respond? How will you respond? For some of us, we do need to consider our relationship with the planet. We didn't think we needed to. We didn't think that was part of this faith thing, but it really is. For some of us, you might have been here for many weeks or months. It might be your first time here. And this news of what it is to be a Christian, the diagnosis of what's wrong with the world and the solution that God has wrought could be news to you. And it could be that actually your response is not just change how you act to the planet, but change how you act to God.